think you could survive in the middle of the ocean? Hunting fish and crabs for food, fending off snakes and other deadly animals, even repairing a plane in order to escape. Today I'll be completing 100% of Stranded Deep, having to survive for 100 days, fighting every boss, and getting every achievement, including one that prevents me being allowed to use a compass, making navigation way harder than it should be. But this adventure started while I was on my plane, when a large storm took a chunk out of it, crashing us in the middle of the ocean. As I came to, I swam out the hole in the plane to climb aboard my life raft, as now I had to survive. Looking around from my raft, I could already see a large shark in the water, so I grabbed my paddle to begin pulling myself to shore, dragging my raft onto the beach to prevent it drifting away. Then decided if I was going to have a chance at surviving here, I was going to need something to eat, somewhere to sleep, and take note of my surroundings to prevent getting lost, since I was not allowed to use a compass. Thus I started to explore the shore, collecting some cloth and rocks that had washed up, before using a rock to break down into a tool that I equipped in my backpack, completing 2 achievements seconds after arriving here. See, in Stranded Deep there are 37 achievements you can get, including surviving 100 days and never using a compass, so I'll be getting every single one. I continued to gather some resources before looking out into the ocean, seeing 2 islands in the distance, and I couldn't get to those now, as if I was to survive here I had to complete my tasks. So I made a refined knife before checking out my watch. This fancy wristwatch can tell me a range of important information. For now though, I needed some food, and that's when I saw a crab. I'm sorry, little one. I skinned the crab, giving me another achievement, but I would not be able to eat this raw. So I needed a fire. Using my knife, I cut down one of the palm trees, which dropped a coconut I was able to collect. Then with my wood, I set up a campfire, only to see I was now sunburnt. So I would have to manage my time in the sun carefully or risk getting heat or sunstroke. With my kindling though, I was able to rub sticks together in order to light the fire, allowing me to place my crab meat on a stick for it to start cooking. But I was also getting thirsty. So with my knife I was getting ready to break into the coconut as my meat finished cooking, giving me another achievement. I cracked open my coconut to drink the water inside, quenching my thirst temporarily at least. So at least now I had something to eat and drink, but this wasn't sustainable. So I have to find a way to make a farm and water still if I am going to survive this forced holiday for the entire 100 days I have to be here. I'll also have to find a way to escape at the end of it. For now though, I didn't want to be sleeping without a roof over my head. Thankfully, that palm tree I cut down earlier, I was able to hack at the palm fronds with my stone knife, eventually breaking them apart to collect. But then I found something amazing. I found a potato. You know, maybe this island isn't too bad. I cut down a ficus tree for sticks that I used with the palm leaves to set up a small shelter, which should at least keep me dry for the night. But I wasn't ready to sleep just yet, so I had a look what I needed for the water still. Now I knew how to get 4 of the ingredients, but because I've never played Stranded Deep before, it does take me a bit longer than expected to get the final ingredient, the coconut flask. But it was getting dark, so I lay down in my makeshift tent and slept for the night. Waking up, I saw my fire had gone out in the night. I also saw on my watch that I was getting thirsty. Since I didn't have the still ready yet, I climbed a nearby tree to grab the coconut, breaking into it so I could have a drink. But I wanted to figure out how to make that coconut flask. So after spending some time harvesting resources and even breaking a coconut in half, I finally found that you can actually cycle through different options for crafting. Yeah, I never claimed to be smart, but now I needed another coconut and some more rope. For more rope, I needed more leaves. And this is when I started to realize how limited my island was, as I made a bundle of rope called lashing but needed a second batch, and I kind of struggled to find enough leaves on my tiny island, but at least I now had enough to set up the water still, giving me a somewhat consistent supply of water. I also then made myself a new rock tool which I used to punch down a tree so I could harvest the palm fronds, as using the fronds I could put them into my still to create me more water. It then started to get late in the day and I wanted to see if there was anything around my island that looked interesting. So that meant going into the water only to not spot the sea urchin, which ended up giving me a nasty rash. A rash that was way worse than I initially expected. I had to be more careful, so not wanting to take any more risks with it getting dark, I headed inland and made myself a hammer that I used to build a wooden foundation. I could build myself a much better house later on, as making this foundation completes the tutorial, giving me another achievement. Much faster than when I tried to beat Palworld without using Pal Spheres. Though now I was truly on my own. Any decisions I make going forwards would truly be my own, and boy did I have a lot I was going to have to learn. So after reigniting my campfire so I could have some light, it was still too dark to do anything, so I lay my head down to sleep for the night. But I had gone to bed too early. Waking up before the sun had even risen, relighting my fire, I decided to have a second look at my life raft, and there was a storage on board, with some rations, a compass, and a bandage. The compass I was not allowed to use, as for one of the achievements you can never use one. So I left it there, but the rations and bandage would be helpful, as I wanted to explore that nearby shipwreck to see if I could find anything useful. So knife in hand, wading into the water, there were some barrels on the ship that I couldn't free, and a wooden crate with some rusty parts I could maybe use. Pocketing the crate to continue exploring, I found a flashlight and some flares I could use to signal a plane or ship if I spot them to save me, but there wasn't anything else, so swam over to the other ship and climbed aboard, finding another crate with some useful tools, and then found a fishing spear in the cupboard. This would be super useful for catching a sustainable food supply. I checked the other room and was about to leave, but I wasn't alone in these waters, as a huge tiger shark came right at me and bit me. I immediately swam aboard the ship to get out of the way, but now I had a shark problem. I tried to shoot it with the flare, but that didn't do anything, so I was going to have to risk it to swim back to shore. Doing one last check of the boat before speed swimming back with my fishing spear, even catching a sardine on the way. I managed to get back where I was able to cook my fish, and found one of the items I got was a spyglass. Using these, I was able to check out the nearby islands. From what I could tell, that one had a lot more trees on it, and likely a lot more supplies. But I wasn't going to leave my supplies here, and thankfully I had these crates now to help me carry everything. I wanted to see if there was a third crate on the ship, but the shark was waiting for me, forcing me back to shore before I even left. At least I had one of those rations to eat to regain my strength. Waking up in the morning, I had a look at my watch and saw the rash I got from that urchin was still plaguing my skin. Even my watch told me I had a poisoning status effect. This wasn't good, so I spent some time catching fish and crabs, skinning them for their meat as I needed the food to be able to get off this island, cooking some on my fire, but the weather started to turn. Rain started falling from the sky, waves were ramping up in size while lightning lit up the sky like a firework. I was in the middle of a storm. And if that wasn't bad enough, even my potato had spoiled. I also needed water, so harvested a couple coconuts, even falling up one of the trees, hurting myself even more. I had to be ready to leave this island after the storm passed, so loaded up my containers on the raft as first thing in the morning I would be leaving this island. Dragging my raft into the water before the sun had even risen. I had to be careful of the sunburn, so couldn't let this take long. I started to paddle and paddle, slowly pulling my boat through the water, going up and down in the waves, till finally reaching the shore. This island seemed magical, but it was not going to be my savior. I cut down a palm tree to set up a temporary shelter, making sure to aim it at the island I had just come from since I wasn't allowed to use a compass. Then began to explore, and there was a giant crab nestled in the trees that I was able to take down from a distance using my spear, giving me 2 nice chunks of steak I could cook. But my health was dropping. I had a tiny sliver of health left according to my watch. So when I saw another giant crab, I was extremely careful to kill it while backing away with my spear, thankfully never getting hit. So I set up a fire to cook the crab steaks I had found, only to die before I could even eat them. You see, remember that sea urchin I got hit by? That urchin had poisoned me. The only way to cure poison is by making an antidote. But to make one, you need a pippy plant. I never found one of those on my island, nor on this new one. So when I spawned back in on my save, it was before I had fought the crabs, still poisoned, destined to die over and over again. Even when I tried visiting different islands nearby in search of a pippy plant. Turns out this game's actually harder than I first thought, so I had to restart, but I won't bore you with that. Now welcome back to a new playthrough. I'll give you a quick tour of my island before we continue the quest of exploration. I did get one achievement this run, and that was to catch 10 fish. So 9 down, 28 to go, and they only get harder from here. So with that out of the way, here is my base. This is my storage system, my house, my water, my foundation, my items, and my watch. So let's go grab my raft, as it's time to explore some more of these islands. I dragged it into the water and began to paddle across the ocean, finally landing on the island. I started to collect what I needed for shelter, only for my watch to warn me of my impending sunstroke. But I collected everything I needed to set up the shelter, making sure to face my original island so I could safely explore without losing it. But as I ventured into the island, I spotted a giant hog and it attacked! So I saw it as a meal, but I needed a weapon. Using my axe to cut down some trees for sticks that I sharpened into spears and began to run at the hog, throwing 3 of them before holding the 4th to start to poke at it until it died, giving me the freedom to skin it with my knife and throwing out my lantern for light as the sun set. But with the skin and meat in my backpack, I needed to get back to my shelter. Chucking some supplies into my raft storage before I was going to set up a fire as a giant crab attacked. I may have thrown a spear at it first, but I don't think that's really relevant. With it dead though, I was able to strike up a flame to start cooking some meat for the day to end, and my meat was ready to eat in the morning. However, I was out of water, and with me being the smart professional YouTuber, forgot to bring a canteen. Maybe I'm not such a professional. Since my second steak was cooked to a perfect medium rare, I pushed my raft back into the ocean to begin paddling home. Even had a little shark friend to swim along for the ride. I think we'll call him Bruno. We'll call him Bruno. Finally arriving at my home island. Sweet water. And with my thirst quenched, I had a look at these palm logs as surely there was something I could do with them. And had a look at the different forms of rafts you can make. So cut down a couple of ficus trees for sticks, then lashed them all together to make a wooden raft. It was honestly smaller than I expected, but it had a great personality. But I was going to need a lot more sticks to be able to upgrade it. So that just means I would have to explore even more islands in order to gather the resources, as I couldn't find any left on mine. It was then day 9 when I was transporting some logs to my storage, but it was so hot. So took a dip in the water, and this time I spotted that evil sea urchin. Not going close to that. So I kept swimming around, staying in the shallows, eventually leveling up my physical. See, not only do I have to complete every achievement, but I also have to level every skill to max for this 100% run. So I kept swimming for exercise, spotting a stingray. Now I wanted to avenge Steve Irwin, but my spears did nothing to it. So I just kept my distance and headed back to shore, where I spent the rest of the day handling my logs, even cutting them into more manageable sizes. But all that log work had drained my food stores. So on the morning of day 10, I took my fishing spear to begin trying to catch some breakfast. Skinning them up and cooking them. Now 2 of the achievements involve not eating fish and being a vegetarian for over 10 days. So I had to look into farming to be able to sustain myself. And I wanted to do that by paddling to the next island. But I hadn't quite realized how late in the day it was. So decided I would head out in the morning instead. So took an early night's rest sleeping in my shelter to wake up and see the achievement for 10 days survived. But it was going to continue to get harder when I need to start hunting down the bosses. So that meant dragging my raft back into the water as the sun was rising, since I could see in the distance what looked like a massive ship. As I paddled closer, it came into focus and I saw my guess was right. But not quite the way I expected. Beaching my raft, I pulled it onto the coast before beginning my ascent onto the wreck. Walking all the way up to the top and pushed open the door, revealing an old broken plane. This could be my way off the island. But the plane appeared to have multiple parts missing from it, and I would need to find all these missing parts. But for now, there was nothing more to gain here, since a storm was also rolling in. I spent some time chopping up driftwood, finding a wooden crate and running from crabs. Till in the morning I began to paddle out to begin my trip home. But if only I had kept proper track of which direction home actually was. Beaching my raft on the island, I thought to be home and running in only to find none of my stuff here. All of this would have been made much easier if I was allowed to use a compass, but sadly I would need to figure out a different way to find my way home. So I simply spent some time gathering a few supplies, including exploring the island's local wrecks, eventually pushing back out only to end up right in the middle of a storm. Waves were crashing over my raft, so I was forced to deploy my sea anchor to stay upright. Holding on for dear life just was waiting on the storm to pass by overhead. But thankfully, it was a short one, freeing me to finish the paddle, arriving at an unknown island in the dead of night. I'm so glad I could find the coconut for a little food and water. But I'd never been on this island before, so I had no clue what I might find here. And running on low food and water, I cut down some palm trees to set up a water stall, then went off to spear some crabs, igniting a fire to cook them up, then witnessed a beautiful sunrise, but shining sunlight all around me so I could begin exploring. I found some cloth and another crate, then was climbing over a rock only to fall straight into another giant hog. I quickly made myself a spear to try and take it out, but I was not in a healthy enough state to be taking these hits, as I barely escaped with my life. I ended up eating one of my emergency rations, topping up my food and water so I could start to recover, but I needed to rest. So I set up a shelter before just hanging out in the shade while I regained my strength. And then enough time had passed as the storm began to brew again. I, however, wanted revenge against the boar, so spear in hand set off to take it on. I took many hits but managed to defeat it, then began to skin my prize for its hide and flesh. I started cooking my juicy hog steak in the morning before swimming out to the nearby wreck, only to spot a shark circling close nearby, and thankfully it couldn't get me on the boat where I found a crate with a compass. I immediately listed it in the ocean, then went to the deck of the boat where I found some buoy balls.
What did he say?
I could use these to make a much better raft, so after grabbing the rest of the loot in the wreck, I just swam back to shore. Using my torch so I could actually see, I decided to keep exploring the island, dragging some logs back to my campsite, collecting some rocks only to keep walking when I spotted something slithering across the beach. There was a deadly snake here, making sure to keep my distance while grabbing the rock nearby before making my way off as it slithered away. I got back to my camp when a giant crab came crashing over my boxes towards me, so pulled out my spear to take it out. However, I needed to get off this island and find my way home. So I collected all my crates, dragging my raft back into the water to begin paddling out. I could even see what looked like a swordfish swimming along by me, but I got back to the island with the aircraft carrier as this was my best bet of finding my original island. Dragging my raft right to where I first landed here and pushed it in, and I could see an island in the distance. I remembered how far away the ship was, so I decided to take a chance and begin the long paddle. But the sun had set and deadly creatures lurk in the night. Something was in the water, and it had found me. Doof, doof, doof. It kept knocking into my raft, trying to knock me off, when I finally got my first glimpse of it. It is a massive fucking shark.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I was now stuck. It was the middle of the night with a shark trying to knock me off my raft. My sea anchor was the only thing preventing my raft flipping over, only for my watch to beep. I needed water. I couldn't wait around here forever as it bumped into my raft again, so I pulled in my sea anchor and started paddling, only for the next bump to nearly tip me over, so I redeployed my sea anchor once more. I was going to wait until the sun rose and pulled out my fishing spears. Where are you, shark? It kept bumping me, but that brought it closer as I threw my spears. Multiple spears thrown, and I was pretty sure I hit at least one spear, but I was out. I now had nothing else I could do besides begin the paddle to the nearest island. The shark thankfully left me alone so I could land on the shore, and saw my stick raft on the left. I was home. I'm now glad I didn't try using the stick raft. So dumping off all of my belongings, I began to fill up on food and water before lashing all those boys together to make a raft, strapping a wood platform to it, but I was running low on sticks. So I did dismantle my stick raft and used them to build a rudder and sail for my boy raft. See, now I could harness the power of wind to sail across the oceans, rather than being reliant on using paddle power. I also made a new fishing spear which gave me the achievement for having crafted 20 tools, then went off to try and catch myself some dinner, but fishing at night was not very effective in the slightest. Even getting attacked by a small crab, but hey, at least I could eat those. But remember how I was low on sticks? That just meant I couldn't eat the crab I had just caught. Great. I know I need to be vegetarian for 10 days as one of the challenges, but I wasn't ready yet. I did manage to find a stick in the middle of some bushes so I could cook the meat. Not starving today, but I was going to need a lot more fish, so spear in hand I swam out once the sun was up, where I did see a large grouper that I was able to stab and drag back to shore before skinning it for some steaks. Great timing too, as a storm rolled in, so I made sure to drag my raft away from the waves as I didn't want to lose it before I even got to use it. So once the storm cleared, I was prepping to sail off in order to liberate more islands of their resources. But the sun was setting, so rather than risk another shark bumping me off my raft, I simply began to prepare for bed when I found a pippy plant. The plant that could have saved my first playthrough. So it's good to know where to find one should I need it. So with full food and water, I dragged my new raft into the water and set sail. Like a true explorer, gliding over the water, over the waves. Even outpacing Bruno who tried to catch my raft, but I was too fast. Landing on the island safely, and I began to explore, looting the wrecks and gathering a massive bundle of sticks, even amidst the storm that rolled in while I did so. Fighting off a crab with my axe so I could cook some more food on the island to lengthen my stay. If only I had remembered to bring along some additional water. I guess I wasn't a professional explorer just yet. But feeling like my mission was a success, having collected a ton of sticks and other resources, I dragged my raft back into the water to sail home again. And this new raft really did feel like a massive upgrade. I made sure to catch a bunch of fish before building a massive fire to cook them all up. I felt like I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. I decided to treat myself by making a better axe that helped me harvest even more resources, including setting up a bundle of ropes and even a hoe. So now I had a good boat and a good hoe. Hopefully I can get to doing some crop farming for an additional food supply. And it was then day 20, and it could get boring on these islands. So I made myself a fishing rod. It didn't help much with the boredom after spending the entire day with my rod in my hand and catching nothing, and my spear was just way more effective for that. Then in the morning of day 21, 3 weeks since my plane crashed in the middle of the ocean, and 79 days until I get the achievement for surviving 100, and I can attempt to escape these islands. I still had a long way to go, but I was ready to take on the challenge. So I did set up a plank station which allows me to cut logs into planks, giving me a sustainable resource I could use to build a house. But it used up my axe, so I had to make myself a new one, and with the axe cut the trees into more manageable log sizes for planks. I wanted the planks though to set up my first farms, even getting an achievement for planting my first crop, but there was another goal. With these, I can grow myself a renewable supply of resources. There is also an achievement I need to get by planting every single crop. So I grabbed the few on my island, even the pippy plants, in case I needed it in the future. I also set up a tanning station, as with the structure I can convert the skin I get from boars into leather, and I also set up a loom which can turn palm fronds into cloth. I was truly starting to enter the industrial age of renewable resources. But with that required some more organization. Stacking my rocks into a pile, then crafted a refined pickaxe. Mining the large boulders into smaller usable rocks, but all that did was work up an appetite. So I headed out to do some spearfishing, even leveling up my hunting and physical skill. I was making good progress leveling, but still had a long way to go to get to max. Cut up the fish at my fire, then lit the fire to start cooking, only to see my plants had actually died from lack of water. Hopefully it rains so I don't need to use my limited resources to grow the vegetables. For now though, I kept chopping down some logs, gutting some fish, then made a water skin so I could keep some water on hand. But hoping it'd rain soon, I set up some extra crop plots in anticipation. And with my base feeling in order, I picked up some of my empty crates, dragged my raft into the water, sailing off to a new island. I even had a whale shark swim alongside me, unloading my stuff on the new island, and this trip was purely for resources, chopping trees and dragging logs back to camp, only to run straight into a boar that chased me to the raft to hide in the water, but thankfully my spear was able to kill it before it killed me. and checking my watch in the morning, I was running low on water. So I was about to go grab some coconuts only to almost step on another snake. But this time I was ready, throwing spear after spear after spear, killing the snake. So 3 spears would kill it. I harvested its skin and was going to continue my way into the island only to see another snake. 1, 2, dead. With the snakes dealt with, I needed to heal up. So I threw the boar steak on the fire when a baby boar came charging into my camp. I wasn't sure why until a giant crab came chasing it in, and it hurt. I checked my watch to see only a sliver of health left, so I snacked on my emergency ration so I could start to recuperate. Later in the evening, I did find a shipwreck to scavenge and got home to see my clock hit midnight as I munched on a steak. But I had gathered a mass of new resources, so I was ready to leave in the morning, dragging out my raft and set sail, even spotting a whale breaching in the distance. Arriving home where I unloaded all my stuff, then saw my yucca plant was fully grown, so now I had a renewable supply of leaves, which gave me the fantastic idea to set up a second water store. It was the best idea I ever had. What excited me most about today was the storm started to brew again, and this was exciting as the rain in game will water your crop plots. I decided to take the opportunity of good weather to plant some potatoes and destroy my original foundation, since I planned to use all my logs to build a proper house. But then on day 26, I literally stood AFK because I forgot to log out. So while I stand here, hit the like button. Don't worry, I'll wait. Okay, thanks. Let's keep going. And since I had wasted an entire day AFK, my food ended up draining completely. So I spent the morning fishing only to spear a lionfish. Now lionfish are one of the deadliest fish in the world. So honestly, I was scared to touch it. So I carried it out the ocean on my spear, dumping it by a rock where I could fillet it to be eaten. Then set up a second fire and cook it to double my food production. For fish anyway. As later on I'll have to survive without eating fish or meat for 10 days. But I had a plan on how to do that. For now though, I enjoyed my fresh water and fish steaks. Then in the morning is when my building officially started. Chopping up logs, crafting them into planks, I leveled up so much I even saw I could now craft the spear gun. This will be useful later when I have to start fighting the bosses, but with my planks mostly ready, I began to plot out a small 2x2 foundation. What? Resources are expensive. I'll build a much better house later on. But it started to get dark and I remembered I had this lantern, so set it up on my tent to be a good spot for light, before lighting a fire that I used to ignite a torch. A torch I did accidentally fling across the island, and fortunately no forest fires were started. And in the morning I wanted to upgrade my weapons, so crafted myself a refined spear, which should help deal with those pesky boars. Then spent some time organizing my palm fronds into a pile, and I needed to start making piles more as there is an achievement I need to get regarding them. So I set up my sticks in a pile as well as my leaves. Sweet organization. But I was getting stir crazy on my island and sailed off to go explore a new one, collecting dozens of sticks, logs and palm fronds, and exploring the island's wrecks and sorting every item to fit into my containers so I could begin the sail home, emptying out the boxes back at camp and using the newfound resources to finish crafting my hut. But I hadn't realized how much exertion this much work had put on my body, draining my food, water and giving me sunstroke. I needed to rest. I at least had a backup supply of sardines I skinned and threw on the fire to allow me to get back to work as the storm was rolling in yet again. Finally finishing most of the structure and celebrating by setting up a metal table so I'd have somewhere to eat. In the early hours of the morning, I expanded my potato farms so they could start growing. I set out on my raft in search of new islands. Heading off far along the way is when finally I spotted some strange poles sticking out of the water. So I led my raft in as I got a pop-up. The Greatabaia. This was a large sunken boat. I wanted to jump in and explore, but with no anchor for my raft, I headed off to the island when I saw a shark friend following along, but it rammed into my raft, flipping it completely. I scrambled to flip it back upright, flailing in the water as a shark grabbed me, dragging me away, but my knife managed to break me free. I scrambled back up and onto the boat, dropping the sails to speed onto shore as the storm rose around me, darkening the sky. I was bleeding, and badly. I needed a bandage, so had to find some cloth and rope. There was a piece of cloth halfway down the beach, allowing me to cut down some bushes for the leaves to string into rope and make a bandage to stem the bleeding. I was now trapped on a random island with less supplies than I planned and had no idea how I was going to survive and get back to my home base. I began to cut down trees for sticks so I could set up a fire to warm myself up, but I needed food. The easiest source of that is crabs. Hunting in the dark had me stepping on them too many times. And with my torch to guide the way, I eventually found some crabs I could spear to take home and eat. Breaking through their shell with my knife so I could cook the meat inside, I at least had my water skin to replenish some water. But with me stranded here, I would need to set up a much larger camp than usual. Dumping the resources I found back at the raft, I set off with my fishing spear to see if the wreck had anything of use, collecting some of the buoy balls and crates hidden within the ship's hull. I was about to swim back, thankfully spotting the tiger shark lurking in the shallows. So using the boat as cover until it grew bored so I could swim back to shore and drop off all of my findings. With my loot, I needed to cook up some more food, so cut down some trees for sticks to light up my fire again. When I spotted there was actually a second larger wreck. I knew the shark was around but took my chance anyway to swim over with torch in hand and begin exploring. This was certainly the largest wreck I had seen yet. If I don't include the aircraft carrier, where I'll be trying to repair the plane to escape after the 100 days. But the wreck had more buoy balls I collected, accidentally breaking my axe in the process. Unfortunately though, I had lost track of time, and the sun had set. I shined my torch in the water to see if there was no shark waiting for me, then dived in to swim back to shore and warm up by the fire. And I saw on my watch all this work had completely dehydrated me. And since I didn't have a still, I ran around collecting some coconuts, breaking into them with my spear to get the husk inside and drink the water within. Feeling more rejuvenated, I began to collect some palm fronds to set up a small tent for a place to save. Then spent the day sipping on coconuts before heading out to go finish exploring the wreck, only to see that the tiger shark had gotten itself stuck. I pulled out my spear before climbing on the container where it was stuck to begin spearing it in the head in order to kill it, allowing me to freely skin the shark for its hide and flesh. And with it dead, I cut free some tires on the ship as these can be used to make a raft, throwing them off the boat to float to shore, when I found another crate to claim on the wreck, then swam to shore, thankfully seeing none of Bruno's friends before getting back to the camp. And when I was making a new axe and got the achievement for 40 tools crafted, that's 14 out of 37 achievements so far. We've slowed a lot on how many I'm getting, but that's because each achievement will continue to get harder to get. The hardest ones, I haven't even started working towards yet. I made my new axe so I could continue the exploitation of this random island, collecting resources and even set up a water still since it seemed like I was going to be here for longer than planned. I then found my tires that had washed up to shore to begin dragging them back to camp, only to remember I still had all those buoys. Now while I did want to make a better, more stable raft, I didn't want to waste the resources on a tire raft. I'd rather get one made of barrels. For now though, to prevent getting flipped again, I tied on some more buoys to my raft, expanding the platform to make it more stable, even placing a second sail on it in hopes it'd make the raft faster, but I'd learn later on this doesn't actually work, and finished off the raft with some platforms as another storm started to brew. I used the cool weather to chop down trees for their logs and palm leaves. Chopping logs, harvesting palms, and cutting down trees, gradually building up my store of loot to take back with me, until all my crates were full to the brim with resources, and dragged my raft out into the ocean, but a storm was brewing. I couldn't afford to wait another day, so it was me on my makeshift improved raft against the elements, setting sail. Lightning striking around me, crashing over waves, shaking me from my rudder as the sun set, engulfing me in darkness. I sailed all through the night once the storm finally cleared, feeling lost until the first island I beached at happened to be my original one. Talk about a stroke of luck. But the voyage had drained me as I ran in to drink water from my stills and munch on one of my potatoes that had fully grown. I began to empty my crates and cut up the palms into fronds for storage, ultimately deciding I should start working towards the 100 piles achievement, placing down multiple piles of palm fronds, and I wasn't exactly sure how many I placed, But if I had to guess, I was at about 30 piles in total so far out of the needed 100. I also needed food, so went to do some spearfishing, even scoring 2 large grouper. It was a good day for fish. Cooking up the steaks on the fire when I saw I had gotten some extra lanterns from one of the wrecks, and set them up around camp to improve the lighting situation. I then used the loom I had made a few days ago to string together my first bit of cloth, completing another one of the easier achievements of which I was running out. Then with the fresh cloth, some leather and sticks, I made a bed for another easy achievement. At least now I had a mobile way of getting some sleep, so I could in theory travel even farther than I have so far, and I will need to in order to get some of the harder achievements. One of which was to make 10 sets of corrugated metal furniture. The cheapest piece I could make was a shelf, which I made 4 before running out of supplies. But that just made me realize I should probably finish my house. I cut up some logs into planks before building up the remaining 2 walls, then cut up more logs into sticks this time and used those to build the roof. Finally carrying my lantern into the small hut to finish it off, making it feel very homely. I also turned a stick into a light hook to place my other lantern more securely down, and finished off the day making a bow and arrow, only to instantly lose the arrow. And I started the next morning by harvesting some of my crops, gathering a ton of leaves, which I used to make some rope in order to craft a tool belt. You need tool belts in order to place items in your inventory on a hotkey, something I admittedly had not used up until now. However, I figured now is better than later, so placed some things onto it. Whether or not I remember to use it is a different story. I was then out fishing when one of Bruno's friends almost caught me, but I was fast enough to get onto the rock, catching another grouper as they were an amazing source of meat, before heading back into shore with my haul, skinning them by the fire to begin cooking. Soon though, I would have to go for 10 days without eating any fish in order to get one of the achievements, so I couldn't rely on fishing forever. And I spent some time in the morning cutting logs into sticks to replenish my firewood supplies, then dumped all my leaves into a pile as a water still supply, and was about to head off for some fishing as Bruno's hammerhead friend was waiting for me, immediately biting me. More and more sharks were starting to surround my island. I would have to defeat one of the bosses in order to reduce the number of shark spawns soon, knowing there were a couple achievements for staying on a single island, so I was going to need to manage my supplies carefully. Heading out to do a ton of fishing with my spear, dropping off the haul at the fire to start cooking them up, before refilling my water stills, then went off on another fishing spree, as I still hadn't maxed my skills, which is a necessary requirement to 100% stranded deep. I even dragged grouper onto the shore, but looking at my watch I had made good progress. So after dragging some supplies back to my camp, and munching on the meat I had cooked, I decided if I was going to be stuck on the same island for a while, I may as well find a way to pass the time, and that was by fishing. And waking up, I thought it'd be a good day to use this time on my island for some spring cleaning, emptying the containers and placing the useful ones around my base, giving a few of them some questionable names. But the work continued throughout the day till I had dumped the empty ones next to my shack. And I had to move my bed into my shack before having a tasty potato breakfast, as I decided I should also be completing the 10 days of being a vegetarian and no eating fish challenges, and spent some time having a swim in the ocean, even making my first use of the oxygen tanks, as these can refill your oxygen while underwater. It will be useful later on when fighting some bosses, and I did have a swim in with the hammerhead shark, but we kind of just let each other go. Though all the swimming tired me out, so I just headed to bed. And it was then day 44 when I realized if I was going to be only eating veggies for 10 days, then I needed more crops. So I set up an extra plot and had some coconut halves for lunch, then spent some time harvesting a bunch of yucca leaves to add to my collection, and had a bit of fun eating a juga plant far into the ocean. But the days were fairly enjoyable here on the island, waking up with a nice early morning swim, doing some tending to the gardens, harvesting taters and planting more, when I realized thanks to all my wooden crates, I could play an epic game of Jenga. So I started to stack the crates on top of each other until I got a bit burnt, so hid in the tree's shade until it got dark, then I went to bed. Then waking up to see I had completed a new achievement. I'd survived 10 days without leaving the same island. I guess I'd forgotten when I stopped here. So at least I can go exploring again, though I still have a few more days where I can't eat any fish or meat. But I am allowed to eat some aloe, which clears your sunburn. Not exactly how that's meant to work, but it is what it is, I guess. And I then spent some time watching the seagulls and tried to drop some fish for them, but I guess they're on a diet as they simply weren't interested. So I had a lunch snack of some potatoes before heading back to my game of box stack, where I played until it got dark and called it a night. And in the morning I continued my daily chores of filling a water still so I'd have plenty of hydration, then went to place one more box on the tower as it came crashing down all around me. That'd be a lesson, people. Don't place too many wooden crates on top of each other, else they fall. I'm truly a prophet, I know. But I then simply spent the rest of the day munching potatoes, harvesting leaves and preparing my raft as I needed to head out in the morning to gather some more resources. Dropping the sails to begin cutting through the wind, hopping to the nearest island. There was a giant hog that I hunted down so it didn't sneak up behind me, then took my time raiding the wrecks, dodging the sharks and chopping up the driftwood into sticks, ravaging the island for its natural resources. Then set off to begin the sail back home as the sun began to set, getting back just in time to lay my head down for the night. And waking up fully refreshed, I had some potato for breakfast, only for a storm to start to brew around me. But I still went for my swim, diving through the very choppy water with my flashlight in hand, dodging the sharks that were using the rough water to hunt. But it finally hit day 50. Halfway to the achievement of surviving 100 days. I still have 20 more achievements I have to get, like fighting every boss, making a motorboat, and crafting one of every single item. One resource I needed for that I hadn't found yet was clay. So swam into the ocean to begin searching for some, finding a large node in the afternoon that I started to chip away at with my pick in order to get more manageable sizes, collecting a whole heap full of it throughout a storm that had been rumbling on the surface. And with the clay I was able to craft a furnace so I could craft a clay flask, giving me another achievement. Then set up a brick station and a fuel still. Here I can ferment potatoes into fuel for my future motorboat. But with it getting late into the day, it finally hit midnight, completing 50 days survived and stranded deep. 10 days without eating any fish, and 10 days without eating any meat. Finally, I would be allowed to eat my fish steaks again. Feeling a bit weaker after my 10 days with no meat, I started my morning right, filleting a ton of fish to chuck them onto the fire, even deciding to butcher 2 of the grouper I had caught previously. Igniting the flames with my kindling so it could start cooking, then while waiting for it to cook began to harvest up more yucca leaves until the food was ready. Munching on the steaks I had cooked to perfection, and they were so good. But I had a trip planned, so pocketed some of the fish I had caught to take them with me. But before I left, I needed a stronger weapon, so after some tinkering combining an air tank, some sticks, leather and duct tape, I made a spear gun. This was going to be glorious. And leaving my shack in the morning, I grabbed my stake off the fire, then made up some extra spears. Dragged my raft into the water, but I realized with where I was going, I needed an anchor. I lashed together some leaves into some rope, collected a couple of rocks from my pile, fastening it all together into a makeshift anchor, then set sail, eventually arriving at thegreatabaia. But this time, I was going into the water. Now admittedly, this was incredibly terrifying. But with the sun starting to set and it getting dark, I decided to tackle this another day and jump back onto my raft to beach at the nearby island. An island I had actually been on before and found all my stuff here. Guess not cleaning up after myself was helpful, so headed to sleep. While here though, I spent some time to continue building up resources, even creating a couple piles of items, since I still needed to get the 100 piles achievement. I then filleted the fish I had brought and cooked them up on the fire, but I was running low on water, so drank from some coconuts while my still collected up some water. I also grabbed a crate nearby before munching my fish and drinking the water. Survival on these islands was truly a constant battle. You have to be so careful to manage your supplies or risk dying. So with that, I continued to build up the resources, but also made sure to yeet an ajuga plant to the sea gods, and then dinner was a tasty grouper steak. And with food, water, and supplies filled up in the morning, I set back out on my raft to finally investigate the greatabaia ship. Now let me tell you, I was not ready. Anchor was deployed as I jumped into the water, and I started to swim around looking for something. I didn't even know what until a health bar popped up. Oh, that's a giant eel. It jumps off the water. Oh no, I did not sign up for this. No, I'm dying. I'm leaving, I'm out. I dropped the sails as fast as I could to get the heck out of there. My spear gun did nothing, and I would need a lot more equipment if I am to take this on. I got to the nearby island, parking my raft so I could explore the wrecks, thankfully having not been followed by the eel. But while exploring, it got fairly dark and sailed off to another island. Beaching nearby, and quickly I had to get a shelter set up, and this island was infested with snakes. So I took it out using my spear gun so I could start to drag logs over to where I wanted my camp, crafting everything I needed so I could head to bed. And waking up having felt defeated by the eel, I spent my morning collecting some resources, crates, and grouper. And I did also have to deal with another snake. Then decided that I had been on this island too long and sailed over to the next one, where I quickly set up a new shelter in order to sleep through the night. But I planned to spend some more time on this island, so swam over to one of the wrecks for a resource run, only to discover some barrels here. Thus, I broke the chains apart, freeing the barrels, dragging them over to the edge of the boat to swim them to the shore. With them all by my camp, I needed to get some stone, and my pickaxe was great for that, so I could then set up a new water stall, something that had become a very common and necessary addition to my camps. But throughout the day, I did have a snake I had to deal with, when I set up a new campfire, giving me another achievement. The achievement for making 5 fires on 5 different islands. Now, admittedly, I thought I was far beyond that, but I guess being stranded makes it difficult to keep track of how many islands you've actually been to. So with the fire, I decided to give myself a nice upgrade and used one of the barrels to make a hobo stove. Also another achievement. 23 down, 14 to go. But after lighting the fire below the stove, I couldn't figure out how to use it. And while trying to work it out, I did have a giant crab come to attack my camp, but I dealt with that after it got stuck on my tent. And I figured out you can just drop the meat right onto the fire. I left the meat to cook while I went out to catch more fish. I wanted to cook a ton of fish steaks on the fire, and as a South African, I can safely say that was a lekker braai. Well, that was a fun barbecue for everyone else. And heading inland though, there was another boar, and using my spear gun fired into it, only to get chased away into the water. Only for the boar to run off and the sun to set, so I made the choice to just spend the rest of the evening at my camp, then headed to bed. I at some point broke my axe again, so after spending a bit of time harvesting sticks and roping it all together into a new axe, I was at least once more able to chop down trees to drag them back to the cabin. As soon I was going to need a lot of weapons and a bigger boat in order to fight that greatabaia. The next morning was spent harvesting fish for food, drinking water from the still, and cooking all the meat on my braai. Even getting a satisfying ding sound every time a steak was cooked to perfection. I also wanted to see if I could use these barrels to expand my raft, but since I had used one for the braai, I was short 1 barrel for a raft foundation. So I'd need to leave this island soon to continue exploring around and build up a bigger boat. And I dragged my raft to set off in the morning, sailing across the ocean, even seeing Bruno again. Or maybe that wasn't Bruno. But I dragged my raft onto the island, dumping off my crates to start the new camp setup, collecting the coconuts, palms and more, setting up the tent and water still, which pretty much took the entire afternoon. So I got ready and just headed to bed. With day 61 starting, I chopped up some logs into sticks as I had an epic journey planned. I wanted to begin exploring every island I could, as there were a few achievements I needed for finding stuff. So most of the morning was spent preparing a ton of resources, packing them into crates, doing final checks of the wrecks on the island, and gathering up the junk which had washed ashore. Then dragged my raft into the ocean to begin sailing farther than I ever had before. landing my raft in the evening, where I immediately began to scour the island. And there were 4 main achievements I was now working towards. I needed to make 10 fires on 10 islands, I have to find Wally, and I have to find all the survivor remnants, and I wanted to find the remaining 2 boss locations so I know where to go when I want to fight them. But with every island I had to set up a camp, as survival was still my ultimate goal, as I couldn't afford to restart again. But I eventually got my shelter set up so I could head to bed. I did spend the next morning gathering resources to build up the campsite, carrying the rocks I needed back to the tent to set up the water store, and cutting the logs into sticks to set up a fire, harvesting crabs for steak to cook, and also slowly working towards the 100 piles achievement by placing down everything I had into neat little bundles of items. I made sure to collect all the trash on the beaches while heading to explore the wrecks, as the scrap metal would come in handy for completing the 10 scrap metal furniture pieces achievement, even if I did have to drag some of the pieces back to camp to stuff in my boxes. But it was remarkably peaceful here on the island, where I cut down the trees for the palms and logs, then feeling full of food and water, did do a night dive on one of the wrecks, but this turned out to be a mistake, since while I was swimming back I didn't see the sea urchin which stung me, poisoning me. I was now on a timer. I began to scour the island in search of a pippy plant, since I had to make an antidote, and got real lucky to find one on the very last corner of the island I checked. I also found and munched on a potato to fill up some extra hunger, and using a coconut and some lashing to make a coconut flask, I stuffed in the pippy plant and drank it, curing me of my poison. Hopefully it doesn't happen again, as there isn't another plant on this island, so I made sure to rest up, as tomorrow was going to be another day. And I packed up all my stuff into the crates in the morning, as I had to keep exploring for those achievements and set sail. I even saw Bruno swim by the raft to wish me well on my journey. On the next island there was a hog I hunted with my spear to kill for its meat, dragging it back to the campsite, same for a giant crab I took out. Then diving onto the nearby wreck, it did have a compass I had to litter in the ocean. It's one of the achievements and challenges I've been working towards, is surviving without ever using a compass. Though it started to get dark before my camp was even ready, I did thankfully find a flare gun I fired into the sky to light up the area, then worked away under the light of the flare, fighting off crabs until I could set up a fire and shelter to sleep through the night. But sleeping just made me run out of water. So giving me a short break of dehydration by drinking a coconut, I started to collect everything I needed for the water store, only to see I was incredibly drained of food, water, and health. So quickly set up the still for water to start gathering, while I harvested the ball for the meat to start cooking. That had been a really close call. I needed to be more careful. As the sun was getting closer to setting and I continued gathering supplies, I was no longer on the brink of starvation and thirst, but my health was still pretty shocking. I needed to get my stats back up and fast, or even a small crab would take me out. While my crab-born water slowly refilled my stats, I even munched on some coconut to push me over the edge, allowing my health to start regenerating again. And waking up in the morning feeling much better rested, I decided to have a rather chill day. So what's the point of being stranded on a desert island if you can't enjoy it? Thus I just ate some steak, dived around the nearby wrecks until deciding to head to the campsite and sleep in my tent. I couldn't hang around here forever though. So after some much needed resource sorting, I collected my boxes, dragged my raft into the water and set sail. So far I continue to go in the same direction I had been so far, hopping from island to island as I explored. Landing at the next one, I made sure to quickly cut down the trees I needed to set up my camp, when I started to hear the distinct hiss of a night adder. But just hearing one isn't enough, as I stood on it getting bitten and now I was poisoned. Again. Great. I dragged my raft out of the way to see it had been hiding under it and did my best to kill it quickly with my spears, but I now had to find another pippy plant. I'm just glad I'd taken the time to fully rest up and heal before coming here. So started exploring, grabbing the scrap as a hog attacked me from behind. I used the water to escape. Twice. I ran around the island where I did find the pippy plants I needed fairly quickly, so at least that wasn't an issue. But I needed to make a new flask as I began to gather the leaves to turn into rope. Gathering enough to lash together and attach to the coconut so I could make the antidote I needed. I've been pretty lucky the past 2 days, but this incident had set me behind on setting up my camp, So I collected all the stuff I needed to set up a stall, then ended up spending most of the day just hanging out on the beach until the sun set. And I wanted to try and improve my raft in the morning, so broke off one of my sails, then checked if I had all the required parts to make a motorboat, only to be short of duct tape. Just duct tape. That is all I needed. I wonder if I could survive 100 hours in real life if all I was given was duct tape. But it started to storm, so as a sacrifice to Poseidon, I yeeted a compass as far into the ocean as I could. Then did my usual chores before I headed to bed. Waking up on day 69, nice. I set sail once more to the next island in the chain, beaching my raft and dumping off my supplies, finding a crate, yeeting a compass and chopping a tree. Camp setup had become fairly efficient, but all I set up here was a campfire, giving me the Columbus achievement. That's 1 out of 4 of my goals for this expedition done, so feeling motivated I set off again. No need to waste any time as I only have 31 days left. I did end up spotting a whale shark following me along, who I named William, only to then spot a yellow boy in the distance. Getting closer, Luscathegreat appeared. This was the second boss location. Luscathegreat made me think this must be a great white shark. I didn't stick around to find out. And landing on the next island and defeating the local crab, our food and water was now completely drained. So I gathered everything I needed to make a fire, lighting it quickly so I could see, and munched on one of my emergency rations, as I had dropped way too much in health for my comfort. I quickly set up the rest of camp to end off the day. Then in the morning I did something I almost never do. I took my time and simply watched the sunrise. I'd loved my time in Stranded Deep so far, and with barely 30% left before I have to leave this place, I still felt like I had a ton I needed to do. There's 13 more achievements I have to get, but in actual fact 3 of them I'll get on the final day. So long as I can average an achievement every 3 days, this should be a piece of cake. But some of those still required me to keep moving as I set sail for the next island, ever searching for Wally and the survivor remnants. At the next island though, I wanted to spend the rest of the day here to completely restock my supplies. With that, however, I began to explore a large shipwreck nearby, where some more tires were tied to the deck. I may as well just expand my raft whenever I can, as I was going to need a huge ship to fight some of the bosses later on. I just had to gather the leaves to craft into rope, then tied the tires to the raft, giving me a now 4x1 platform. I planned for it to get a whole lot bigger now that I knew you could just attach any pieces to your raft. Now with my new knowledge, I wanted to upgrade my raft. So after I killed the crab harassing me, I cut down some trees to break the logs into sticks, lit a campfire so I could cook up breakfast, then continued to harvest what I could before pushing up my raft and attaching a stick platform to it, showing me that I could not just build the raft wider, but longer as well. I would need a lot more resources, however, to do so, thus I dragged my raft into the water and set sail, till I got to the next island and there was a massive shipwreck. I emptied all my junk onto the beach before climbing aboard the wreck and began to toss barrels and tires overboard to float to shore. The sun set soon after, but I dragged the remaining few pieces to shore, and with the small bit of moonlight I was able to cut down a tree and build my shelter to sleep through the night. I was then back on the wreck in the morning, where I dumped tires, barrels, exploring the entire wreck, even almost running out of breath at one point. I could then simply loot the rest of the ship, even breaking the buoy balls that I threw towards the shore so they could float in. I did almost fall and break my neck on a ladder. Thankfully only mild injuries were felt, and I just now had dozens of bits of trash floating around I had to get to shore. But I was getting thirsty, so headed in and set up a still to quench my thirst before laying down my head in order to sleep. I spent the first few moments of the morning collecting the buoys I had thrown overboard, but that was the easy part. I just first had to eat, so lit the fire to begin cooking, and with my strength coming back to me, I used some of the tires to start expanding my raft, tying them to the side of it along with some barrels. Now though, I needed to go collect the remaining barrels I had littered in the ocean, dragging them and the tires back to shore, building up a neat little pile of floaties to add to my raft, then headed to bed. In the morning, I had to build the raft. I used 2 of my crafts to make a jack of sorts, holding the raft in the air. Then using some rope I had found on the wreck, I tied all the barrels and tires to the raft, using my planks and sticks creating the floor of it. I even set up a canopy with some sticks and cloth to help with the sunburn. I did destroy my old sail to move it into the center, only to start to load the crates I had onto the raft. And it was then day 75, where I cooked up some more meat and just spent most of the day chilling on the beach. Building that raft had been tiring. The next day I loaded up all my boxes. I even realized I could just destroy my still to take some of the resources with me in order to speed up the camp setup. Then dragged my raft into the ocean, setting sail. It felt so good to be able to sail the high seas without getting a sunburn. Even sailing all around an island, looking if there was anything of interest but not spotting anything. So with the sun setting, sailing was much harder as I crashed onto a rock, getting my raft stuck. I now only had one thing I could do, and jumped into the water to swim the raft ashore. I had to deal with the crab hiding on the beach, quickly setting up my camp. It was too late to sleep, so working through the entire night fighting off boars until I finally got a shelter set up in the morning, but my health was bad. I was severely injured from all the boars. Thankfully the boars are a good source of meat I was able to cook. Making sure to take no risks, I went to a nearby wreck and did have to yeet another compass into the ocean, but that's when I found something I had desperately wanted. I was searching another crate and found duct tape. Glorious duct tape! I instantly grabbed all my vehicle parts, smashing them together into a working motor. Achievement done. Now all I needed was some fuel. I guess I need to head back to my main camp soon. And I had a tasty steak for breakfast, then loaded up everything I could, including the water still. Dragged the raft out to continue my adventures, but this journey had been fruitful to the point that my raft was starting to sink below the water from all of the loot, even after upgrading it. I pulled the crates into the middle of the raft to balance things out a bit better so I could safely sail ahead, and I dragged my raft ashore, then used a flare to light up the sky, only for a boar to charge at me to begin attacking. With my spear in hand, I fought off the hog, finally killing it. But the fight had weakened me, so hastily set up camp, sleeping through the night. I made sure to loot the ships on the island, refilling my food and water, and even finding some potatoes to snack on. And with every one of my supplies refilled, I packed everything I could onto my failing raft and pulled it into the water, but it was dangerous to sail like this. Making the harsh decision to dump some of the empty boxes into the water so I'd halt the sinking. And I had not planned on stopping at the next island, but I spotted something and parked closer to get a good look at it, and this was a survivor remnant. A person who had been trapped on these islands before me had never left. Don't worry buddy, I'll get out of here for the both of us. I figured if Larry here had camp, I chose to set up right next to him, ending off day 80. Slowly falling behind my goal of an achievement every 3 days, as I'd only gotten one in these past 10. 20 days remain and 12 achievements to go. I truly had a challenge ahead. Waking up in the early hours of the morning, I made sure to loot everything I could on the island, even having a close call with Harold the Hammerhead. But me being a true loot goblin now just had so many boxes I didn't even know how I'd get them on the raft. If only I could attach them to it. But then as I kept hunting and foraging, I ran straight over a snake, poisoning me. Great. Just what I needed when I was preparing to leave. My health was super low as well, but I did fortunately find a pippy plant nearby and was able to craft an antidote. Now though, I definitely had to get off this island, so one final rest, loading all the crates onto the raft in the morning, dismantling my camp, then dragging the raft into the water right over a sea urchin.
Doesn't look good.
Yeah, I was getting careless with these damn things. Even a crate fell off the back. So stacking them back up, I sailed to the nearest island, set up the water store and was searching for a pippy plant, but actually found one right where my ship landed. So a quick antidote was made and drank, but it was now the middle of the night, and all there was to do was build up a shelter and sleep through it. I didn't intend to stay on this island for long, though I did find another compass to yeet into the void, before preparing to set sail only for a storm to roll in, so I made the wise decision and simply waited it out. Pushing my raft into the ocean as the sun was rising, nearly losing some crates as the waves pushed us up and down, searching for more survivor remnants, and I hadn't planned on stopping at the next island, but I crashed into a rock. So pulled in my raft and figured I'd explore a bit, and Poseidon must have been smiling down on me as I found some more loot, but was smart to not grab the crates this time. More importantly though, I found a koala plant. You see, one of the achievements I need is to plant every crop on the same island, so this was incredibly important, as not only that, but I found a cura fruit nearby too. The last two plants I needed for the achievement. Admittedly, I'd forgotten about it, but these were super useful to me. So this was a great island to have crashed on. So feeling pleased with my haul, I set sail once more to the next island when I spotted a structure on it. There was another survivor remnant here. Billy here had some great stuff I was able to claim. He wasn't going to need it. But most importantly of all, he had a friend. Wally. A friend! I've got a friend! Yay! You're coming home with me. And with Wally the volleyball, my new best friend, I decided to set up camp here, working late into the night with a flare for light, setting up the shelter, having some rations in the morning since I couldn't be bothered to go and hunt down anything. Then as I set sail, I spotted something. That's a whale! Whale, hello there! A truly majestic sighting indeed. It started to get dark though, so parked on the nearest island to set up camp and sleep through the night. In the morning, I found another kuwawa fruit I munched on for breakfast. Then I continued my sailing adventures, going around some islands, but seeing nothing interesting until in the distance I spotted something. Something floating on the surface. It was the Meg, munching on a whale carcass. I pulled around for a closer look as its health bar appeared and it dived into the water. So using the wind, I sailed out of there as fast as I could in fear it would destroy my raft. Eventually just spending the night on a nearby island, as in the morning, I would be heading home. And sailing off when I spotted the giant ship off in the distance. I now knew exactly where I was, sailing for the entire day until I spotted it. Home. Home, sweet home. Landing on my original island, seeing all my stuff was still around, and sleeping in my comfy bed once again. I ate some potatoes for breakfast, then grabbed all my scrap metal, using it to set up some crop plots to plant the kuwawa and kura fruit for the horticulturist achievement, since I now had one of every farm crop planted. With the rest of the scrap, I made up container shells to get the industrial fashion achievement. 28 done, 9 to go. The hardest of which is to craft one of every single item. So I spent a bit of time making random stuff in my base like the bird snare and fish trap. I also gave Wally a nice spot on my shelves in the house. Don't worry, I'll grab him when we repair the plane to escape these islands. Then lit up the fire on my fuel store to begin mashing some potatoes into fuel for a motor, as I had a plan. Collecting it with my jerry can, and this is where things might get a little confusing, as I saved the game at my bed. You'll understand why this is important soon. Then in the morning of day 90 of an alternate timeline, I grabbed all of my car parts and raft, using the motor to zoom across the ocean towards a giant aircraft carrier. Climbing all the way up the stairs where I was able to collect the gyrocopter parts. With these parts, I was able to use the vehicle parts I'd been collecting to build them all together into the gyrocopter. I'd forgotten some fuel to be able to start its engine, so quickly sailed home with it on my raft, where I was able to refuel the gyrocopter and took off into the sky. Now this is why me saving was so relevant. As if you look on the gyrocopter here, there is one small detail about it. It has a compass. One of the achievements I need to get is to beat the game without ever using a compass. So as fun as it is to fly this copter through the sky, I am not allowed to use it. Landing on the island next door, I exited the game without saving, before loading back into the correct timeline at the end of day 89, just before I went to sleep safely in my bed without having ever made the gyrocopter. Waking up from the strangest of dreams, where I had somehow built a working helicopter that didn't let me escape from these islands. I had a tasty breakfast of fish, which had been lying on my island for like 30 days and never spoiled. Tasty! I also did some gardening before continuing my random item building like the smoker, a wood hook, and a container shelf. A shelf which allows me to attach my boxes to it. I of course wondered if I could place these on my raft, and I could. I can only imagine how many of you have already commented that I should have made these many days ago. So with my new knowledge, it was time to begin preparing to take down the sea monster bosses. So it was time for many days of refining hide into leather, breaking stones into spearheads, traveling to nearby islands where I cut down trees to break into sticks, working late into nights, early morning harvests of leaves to be made into rope, all while tending to the fires of my fuel still so I could use my motor to get around. But the grind never stopped, as I crafted dozens upon dozens of spears. Day in and day out, it was a glorious preparation for war. And I dragged my raft into the ocean on day 94, setting course far west as I planned to take down the Meg. But I had forgotten one small detail. Let's try this again. I had forgotten to craft a new anchor. I didn't have the supplies I needed to make a new anchor, so had to sail to a nearby island, where I spent the day fighting off wild animals, fighting wild bushes for leaves and stealing rocks from their stone families on the beach, until finally combining them all together in order to make a new anchor. Then sailed back to the floating whale carcass as it was time to take down the Meg. Objective complete. No, my spears! They also no! With the Meg defeated, achievement claimed, loot acquired, I had a long sail back home since I had run out of fuel. So once back, I refilled my still with potatoes to begin fermenting, then filled up the engine and motored far southeast to begin the fight against the greatabaia. Through stormy weather and dozens of spears, finally, the eel was defeated. But the fight didn't stop there, as my journey continued, arriving at Luscathegreat. However, as I got there, it was the middle of the night and not a chance was I diving into the depths to an unknown foe. So once the sun had risen, I swam down and threw my spear into the depths, causing a massive squid to emerge and attack. With what was the hardest fight yet, Luska was dead. All 3 sea monsters defeated and all 3 trophies claimed for another achievement. 6 more to go. But the fights and the traveling had taken longer than I planned, as I finally got home, since now I had the absolutely awful task of crafting every single item in the game. So stuff like the wooden table, a container wall, crafting all of the items until the end of day 100, giving me the achievement for 100 days survived. So I ended up going over 100 days, but I needed to explore more islands collecting resources, when I did find the remaining survivor remnant for another achievement. Then continued the absolute crafting escapade, smashing clay rocks, making bricks, breaking old structures for more resources, and also worked on making 100 random little piles of items for another achievement. But that's when I realized the final items I needed to craft I already had, but in another timeline. So I instead spent my days gathering food, water, and fuel, then set sail to the island of the aircraft carrier. I made sure to save, then grabbed the gyrocopter parts and built it up to finally get the achievement for one of every single item crafted. Damn, that took forever, but for you it was maybe like 2 minutes. And with the last 2 achievements being left, I gutted all the fish I would need, cooking them up on the braai one last time before sleeping for the final night. And I ascended to the top, where I stocked up on the food, water, and fuel. Then in went the propeller, engine, and rudder. And this was it, Wally. We were going home. Then climbed into the plane. Here we go. Hopefully this thing works. Come on. Come on. Okay. Let's close up. Probably should have closed that flap. I'm sure I'll be fine. Okay, what next? Okay, let's engage the rail. Go. Ah, it automatically closed. Fantastic. Oh, I probably should have cleared that stuff at the end of the runway. Ah, too late now. Check your right mirror. Check your left mirror. Okay. Launching. And with that, the final 2 achievements were gained, completing 100% of Stranded Deep. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.